A lot of backpackers want to go farther. Sometimes they want to see more trail. They want to reach bigger places. Maybe there's a loop they've always wanted to do, or a lake that's just a little farther than they normally go. But then their pack starts getting heavy, and the miles start getting slower. And after a while, the trip can start feeling a little bit less like an adventure, and more like something that you're just trying to get through. And that's where fastpacking gets interesting. Not because you have to become some elite trail runner, but because it asks a pretty simple question. What if you could move lighter, move better, and still sleep out here? Now the problem is, I think most people hear the word fastpacking and immediately picture the wrong thing. They picture big mountain ultras, somebody with a tiny pack, eating cold food, no comfort, and some person running through the mountains like they're being chased. And if that's what you picture, I get it. That version of fastpacking probably doesn't sound very inviting to most backpackers. But I think that the most useful thing about fastpacking is not actually the running. At least not for most of us. In this video, I want to talk through what fastpacking actually is, why it sits between trail running and ultralight backpacking, and whether it makes sense for regular backpackers. And by the end, I think you'll have a much better idea on whether or not this is something worth trying, or whether it's something that you just want to say, it's not for me. Because to me, this is not about trying to make backpacking into something different. To me, this is about how far out into the wilderness can you get? How much backcountry can you move through safely with the time, skill, and gear that you already have? So let's talk about why fastpacking is actually worth talking about. Maybe there's a lake that's just beyond where you normally stop. Maybe there's a loop that you keep looking at, but every time you map it out, it seems like it's a little too much for a weekend. Or maybe you just want to see more backcountry without feeling like your pack is slowly beating you up all day. That's where this idea starts to matter. Because more miles with a heavy pack feels way more different than more miles on paper. When you're at home planning out, a route can look really reasonable. And then you get out there, and you're climbing hills in the sun, shoulders are getting tired, your feet are starting to feel it, and then you still realize that you still got 5 miles to get to camp. And then on the trail running side, there's a different problem. When you go out for a day run, it eventually has to end. Yeah, you might cover a lot of ground, but at some point, you've got to turn around and go back to the car and go home. Fastpacking sits somewhere in between those two worlds. It borrows some of the movement mindset of trail running. It borrows some of the lighter systems of ultralight backpacking. And then it adds the one thing a normal trail run doesn't have, the ability to stay overnight. So when I think about fastpacking, I really don't think the most important word is fast. I think a more useful word is range. It's not about how fast you can go. It's more about how much backcountry can I reasonably and safely move through with the gear and skill that I already have. To me, that's the part that makes it all interesting. Because if you can move more efficiently, carry less, and still have what you need to spend the night safely, then some routes start to look differently. Yeah, I don't mean they're going to be easy, but they now become possible. And that's why I think fastpacking is worth understanding, even if you never call yourself a fastpacker. But first, we need to clear up one of the biggest misunderstandings. Fastpacking is not just running with camping gear. So here's the simplest way that I think I can explain it. Fastpacking is kind of like the overlap between trail running, ultralight backpacking, and being able to take care of yourself overnight. But even that can sound a little misleading. Because when some people hear the word trail running, they immediately think, well, I'm out. I'm not running 20 miles through the mountains with a pack. And honestly, most people fastpacking are not running every step all the time. That's one of the biggest misconceptions that people think. Fastpacking doesn't mean that you have to run the entire trail. A lot of people will hike when it starts to get steep. Maybe they walk the technical sections. Maybe they slow down when the trail starts to get rough. They're probably still stopping for water, to eat their food, or even just to take a break to be able to shift and adjust your layers. Most of these people are still making the same backcountry decisions. The difference is that the whole system is actually built around moving more efficiently. Yeah, a lot of times your pack is lighter, Maybe your gear's more compact. Your pace might actually be a little quicker. Maybe your brakes might be a little shorter. And the trip is usually planned a little bit more around steady movement versus spending hours in camp. So fastpacking's not just trail running with a tent. And it's not just backpacking with a smaller pack. It's more like asking, what's the lightest, most efficient overnight system that I can carry, while still being safe and realistic for the terrain I'm actually going into? And to me, guys, that last part actually really matters, because the goal is not to prove that you can suffer with almost nothing. At least that's not how I look at it. The goal is to move well and still take care of yourself. And to me, there's a big difference between those. And then once you start to see it that way, the gear starts to make a little bit more sense. But this is also where people can start cutting the wrong things. When you're fastpacking, it's really easy to jump straight to the gear. What do I need? What shoes should I wear? What shelter should I use? What sleep system? And all of that does matter, but I think it helps to understand the reasons behind it. The gear changes because the movement changes. Or maybe a better way to say it is, the gear has to move with you. A pack that feels fine when you're hiking can feel pretty awful when it starts bouncing around when you start to move faster. That's why a lot of fastpacking packs look a lot more like running vests. You often see the bottles up front. A lot of times your snacks are easy to reach, and they have a lot of shoulder pockets. And it's typically a pack that hugs your body a lot more than a normal backpack does. And also your footwear changes. Most fastpackers aren't wearing heavy boots. They're usually wearing trail runners because the whole reason is movement. But that doesn't mean you grab just any regular tennis shoe and hope it works out. You still have to think about things like traction, durability, foot protection, what's comfortable for you, and how your feet handle long days with weight on them. Then there's the sleep system. And this is one of those places where beginners get into trouble when you start talking about fastpacking. Because if you try to eliminate some of your sleep system, you're going to regret it. Yeah, you may want a lighter quilt or sleeping bag, maybe even a smaller air pad. And yeah, in these situations, you could probably go with a more compact shelter. But you can also cut too far. And if you cut warmth aggressively, that weight savings is not going to feel very smart at 2 in the morning. Same thing with your shelter. A tarp, bivvy, trekking pole shelter, or even a very lightweight tent can all make sense in the right conditions. But when you're trying to decide what to use, you have to think about things like the route, the forecast, the bugs, how much wind are you getting, and even how much experience do you have with these systems. Fastpacking is not an excuse to pretend that the weather doesn't exist. Food and water also matter more than people realize. When you're moving more, you usually need to fuel better. You may end up needing to eat more often. You're definitely going to need to know where water is, because moving faster doesn't replace planning. If anything, it actually makes planning more important. So the saying that I would keep in mind is this: lighter does not always mean smarter. Smarter means carrying the right gear for the right route, the right weather, and your actual ability. That includes warmth, navigation, water treatment, some kind of emergency plan, and the right humility to turn around or to change the plans if things aren't actually going the way they should. Because even with the right gear, you could still mess this up if you treat it like a normal backpacking trip. Fastpacking is a different mindset. This is where fastpacking gets a little bit more interesting to me, because it's not just a gear category. It's a different way of thinking about the trip altogether. With normal backpacking, a lot of people plan around camp. Where am I going to sleep? What am I going to cook? How comfortable do I want to be when I'm there? And honestly, that's a great way to backpack. I love time in camp. I love slowing down. I even like having comfort. But when I decide that I want to go fastpacking, the plan needs to be a little bit more around movement. You're not just asking, how far is it? You're asking things like, where's the climbs? Where's the water? And where are the bailout points if things don't go right? Then you start looking at things like, what sections are potentially runnable? What sections are definitely hiking sections? And what happens if I'm actually slower than I expected? This is where distance can really start to fool people. 10 miles is not just 10 miles. 10 miles on smooth rolling trail is very different than 10 miles with loose rock, high elevation, heat wind, or a pack that doesn't carry well. When you're out there, the terrain matters, elevation matters, weather matters, and your body matters. You might be able to run a certain pace around your neighborhood. That doesn't mean that you can hold that same pace at altitude while carrying overnight gear after hiking for hours. So your mindset has to shift from how fast can I go to how can I move steady and make good decisions for the whole route. That's the part that I like the most, because good fast packing shouldn't be reckless. It should be intentional. You need to be thinking about your energy, your gear, your route, and what you can give up without giving up safety. And this is where the comfort trade-offs come in. A fast-packing setup probably won't be as comfortable at camp as a traditional backpacking setup. You may not have a chair. You may not have a really roomy tent. You may not carry a whole bunch of extra clothes. You may not want to sit around camp for 4 hours. And that becomes part of the trade. The trip becomes more about movement and less about time at camp. I know, it may sound terrible to some of you, and that's fine. That's why I don't think fast packing is automatically better than backpacking. Sometimes I like to just go on a standard backpacking trip. But here's probably the most important thing in this whole video. Fast packing rewards people who knows their systems, and it'll punish people who are just guessing. If you know how warm you sleep, how your shelter handles in the weather, how much food you need, how your feet respond to long miles on trail, and how fast you actually move in rough terrain, then you end up making smarter choices. But if you're still guessing on all that, then cutting weight and adding mileage all at the same time can get really uncomfortable really quickly. And this is where I think a lot of beginners getting into fast packing make the wrong jump. The mistake is thinking fast packing is all about buying the tiny pack and cutting out all of your gear. I think that's kind of backward. Fast packing should start with knowing your backpacking systems. Before you start shrinking your pack, you should know what your systems actually do for you. What do you really use? How much food do you actually eat? How does your body handle a long day? And what are you carrying because you actually need it? Versus what are you carrying because you're nervous? Because those are definitely different things. Don't get me wrong, a chair might be nice at camp, but it's probably not essential. But a warm enough sleep system is different. Proper rain protection is different. Being able to navigate is different. Making sure you have water treatment is different. And a way to stay warm if the weather turns is different. That's why I wouldn't tell a brand new backpacker to make fast packing a big goal. If you're still trying to figure out how to stay dry, fed, warm, hydrated, and reasonably comfortable, then I would build that foundation first. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn from fast packing. You absolutely can. Fast packing teaches you to question what you carry. Not just the ounces, but in movement, energy, and time. You don't have to jump immediately into overnight fast packing trips to learn those lessons. Build the system first, then start experimenting. And if I was starting from zero, I wouldn't start with an overnight fast pack. I'd start with something a lot more simpler. Your first goal shouldn't be to become a fast packer. The first goal is to learn what helps you move better. So I'd start with a faster hike. Pick a familiar trail that you're used to doing. Maybe take a lighter day kit and start to notice what slows you down. Notice how your shoes feel. Notice how often you stop. Pay attention to how you fuel. And notice whether you're moving efficiently or are you just rushing? Because those are definitely different things. Rushing usually makes you sloppy. Efficient movement, it keeps you steady. Now that you've got that figured out, now you can try a longer day with more intentional gear. Don't go extreme, just be a little bit more intentional with what you're doing. And use that longer day to test out the basics, like fueling, water timing, shoe comfort. What actually is slowing you down? What do you reach for? And what are the things that you never use? That teaches you a lot without necessarily committing to an overnight. And if that goes well for you, try an easy overnight closer to the trailhead. Try to make sure you've got good weather. Let it be an area that you're familiar with. Let it be a low-risk route. And make sure that you've got bailout options. When you're dealing with fast packing, you need to leave the ego at home and leave those big ego routes out. Don't do something like, let's see how far I can push this. Just a simple overnight where you can test a lighter system, but still have a real safety margin. And if you decide to add running, add it slowly. You don't need to start off running climbs. You don't need to run the technical sections. And you definitely don't need to run because somebody online made it look cool. Start off walking the climbs. Try to move steadily. Run short sections on smooth flats, or even the gentle downhills if you think your body's ready for it. And if running makes the trip less enjoyable, or it starts to feel like an injury waiting to happen, then don't force it. You can still learn from fast packing without turning the whole trip into a run. Then as you get better with this, start to reduce your gear. And as I've said many times here, don't cut warmth first. Don't cut weather protection first. Don't cut navigation first. Don't cut your water treatment first. And definitely don't cut the things that could make a bad situation worse. Start by cutting the obvious extras. Look for duplicate items, maybe luxury items that you really don't use that much. How much food do you typically carry out when you're done? But also make sure you've got enough food for that extra movement. As you start to test out moving more, you're going to notice how much you need to eat. And so then you can slowly start to dial in exactly how much food you need to carry. So that way you're not carrying out a whole lot of extra food, because that just becomes a lot of extra weight that you're carrying. Pay attention to what clothing you brought because you were anxious, but you didn't really need it or use it for the conditions. That's where I would start with all this. Not by gambling with your sleep system, not by ignoring the forecast, and definitely not by pretending that the mountains are going to cooperate with you. The first goal is not to carry the smallest pack possible. The first goal is to build a system that matches the trip. And as I've said many times here, that's the lesson that fast packing can teach regular backpackers. Even if you never end up calling yourself a fast packer, even if you never end up running a single mile, it can teach you to move with a lot less waste, less unnecessary weight, less stopping and digging through your gear, less guessing, and maybe more intention. So here's my honest answer. Should regular backpackers actually care about fast packing? I think yes, but not because everyone needs to become a fast packer. Fast packing is not for every backpacker, and it's definitely not for every trip. Some trips are just better slow. Some trips are a lot more fun if they're about camp. Maybe some trips are about fishing, photography, hanging out with friends, drinking coffee at sunset, or just not being in a hurry. And I definitely don't think we should lose any of that. Backpacking doesn't need to become a race, but fast packing is worth understanding because it teaches you how to think more intentional about weight, movement, route planning, and what you actually need. It may actually make sense for people who like hiking longer days. It may actually make sense for backpackers who are curious about going lighter. It may make sense for trail runners who want to turn one big day into two and an overnight in the mountains. It may make sense for some hikers who want to trade some trail comforts for more movement. But it may not make sense yet if you're still brand new and still learning the systems. It may not be the right fit if you really value camp comfort. It may not be the right fit if you're not confident with navigation, water planning, weather, or staying warm. And it's definitely not the right fit if you're using it as the excuse to leave important safety items behind. To me, the best version of fast packing is not about proving how tough you can be. It's not about pretending discomfort is the goal. And it's definitely not about becoming some elite athlete overnight. It's about asking a better question. Is there a lighter, smarter, more efficient way to move through the mountains? And that's why I think fast packing is such an interesting missing link between trail running and ultralight backpacking, because it borrows from both worlds. But it also shows what can go wrong if you take too much from either world. Trail running without enough overnight margin can get risky quick. Ultralight backpacking without enough movement strategy can still feel slow and inefficient. Traditional backpacking with too much extra weight can make a trip feel harder than it needs to be. Fastpacking sits in the middle, and it asks this question: what do you actually need? How well do you know your system? And how do you want to experience the trail? So if you're curious about fastpacking, I wouldn't go off buying a whole brand new kit. I'd just start by paying attention. Pay attention to what slows you down. Pay attention to what you never use. Pay attention to when your pack starts to feel like a burden. And pay attention to whether or not you actually enjoy moving all day, or whether what you would actually really love would be relaxing at camp. Both of these answers are fine. Fastpacking is not better than backpacking. It's just another way to move through the mountains. And for some people, it may open up routes that they never thought were possible before. For some, it might actually teach people to pack lighter and move a little better on normal backpacking trips. And that alone is probably worth understanding. So I'm curious, are you looking at fastpacking more from the backpacking side, from the trail running side, or from the ultralight side? Let me know in the comments. And just remember guys, with fastpacking, the goal is not to suffer more. It's to just get out and see more. As always guys, I hope this was useful to you, and hopefully I see you guys out on the trail.